everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are taking on a massive challenge, breaking down the anatomy of socialism. It's a highly complex, historically loaded, and, let's be honest, heavily debated ideology. But today, we are going to strip away all the political shouting. We're just going to look purely at the historical record and the foundational texts to see exactly how this ideology actually works.
Okay, let's kick things off with a famous quote by John Donne. "No man is an island. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main." This is absolutely perfect for capturing the absolute core of the socialist mindset. It hits the nail on the head regarding fraternity, this fundamental idea that we are all deeply tied together, rather than just being isolated, self-interested individuals.
So, to navigate this incredibly wide variety of rival traditions, we've got a pretty clear roadmap for us today. 1. Origins of an ideology. 2. 5 core themes. 3. The roads to socialism. And 4. The communist tradition. Let's just dive right in.
Part 1. Origins of an ideology. How did this all actually start? Well, socialism was born out of a very specific historical context, a direct reaction to the intense changes of the 19th century Industrial Revolution.
To really wrap our heads around socialism neutrally, we first have to look at what it was built to oppose: early industrial capitalism. Picture yourself as a first-generation urban factory worker back in Europe. Sure, the market is booming, but your daily reality? It's harsh. We're talking 12-hour workdays, severe poverty, and incredibly low wages. Those brutal, disorienting conditions left a massive, brand-new working class desperately searching for some kind of alternative.
Because of that, socialist strategy shifted with lightning speed. We're looking at a massive evolution over just a single century. It branches from these early, peaceful utopian experiments in the 1820s straight into the explosive, revolutionary text of Marx and Engels in 1848. And later, you see a massive schism. You have groups like the Fabian Society championing peaceful legal reform, which contrasts sharply with the violent, dramatic upheaval of the 1917 Russian Revolution.
Those earliest responses in the 1820s from figures like Charles Fourier and Robert Owen were deeply utopian. They didn't even want to fix the capitalist system. They essentially just wanted to step off the treadmill entirely. They went out and built small experimental communities based completely on sharing and cooperation rather than ruthless competition.
All right, moving to part 2, 5 core themes. We know where it came from, but what is the actual philosophical bedrock of this whole ideology?
The crucial takeaway here is that regardless of the specific socialist tradition, whether we're talking about democratic reformers or revolutionary communists, they almost all build upon 5 foundational pillars: community, cooperation, equality, class politics, and common ownership. Grasping these 5 concepts is literally the key to understanding the socialist mindset.
Let's look at that first one, community. It brings up that classic, age-old debate, nature versus nurture. And socialists, they resolutely plant their flag in the nurture camp. They argue that human nature is absolutely not fixed at birth. Instead, it's plastic. It's completely molded by society. Because they believe individuals are utterly inseparable from their environment, socialists always emphasize collective community action over individual self-striving.
But then we get to equality. Honestly, of all the core themes, this is arguably the big one. It's the primary defining value that fundamentally distinguishes socialism from its classical liberal and conservative rivals.
Which brings us right to egalitarianism. Classical liberals typically push for equality of opportunity, basically making sure everyone starts the race at the exact same starting line. But socialists endorse a much stronger version of egalitarianism. They argue that true justice demands social equality. We're talking relative or even absolute equality of outcome and material circumstances. The logic is that if people actually live in equal material conditions, they'll be far more likely to identify with one another and work together.
However, as history shows us, the pursuit of absolute social equality can have some pretty extreme real-world consequences. A prime example of this is China's Cultural Revolution under Mao Zedong, which started in 1966. It was this massive attempt to forcefully eradicate literally all privilege, hierarchy, and wage differentials, but ultimately, as an exercise in absolute egalitarianism, it was a dismal failure. It resulted in intense societal chaos, factional violence, and a severely damaged economy.
Okay, part 3, the roads to socialism. We know the philosophical ends now: community, equality, common ownership. But what about the means? This is where we see some really intense historical debates emerge over exactly which road to take to actually build this ideal society.
Right here, the ideology hits a fundamental fork in the road. On one side, you have the revolutionary path. Thinkers in this camp totally believed the existing state was inherently biased towards capital and therefore had to be violently overthrown. On the flip side, you have the evolutionary path. This gained a lot of traction as the working class was finally granted voting rights, leading to this new belief that the democratic ballot box could just be used to legally, peacefully transition into socialism.
That evolutionary road is really defined by a concept called gradualism. Thinkers like Edward Bernstein or groups like the UK's Fabian Society had this incredibly optimistic idea. If you just extend voting rights to the massive working class, a peaceful transition to socialism basically becomes a mathematical inevitability. They reasoned that the working class would just naturally vote for socialist parties, slowly legislating capitalism away piece by piece.
Which brings us to part 4, the communist tradition. We're going to examine the faction that totally rejected that gradualism, opted for the revolutionary road, and sought the absolute abolition of private property. To really get this, we have to grasp the foundation of classical Marxism, historical materialism. Karl Marx believed that the economic base, meaning the mode of production and the class system, is the literal foundation that fundamentally dictates absolutely everything else in society. Culture, politics, art, religion, law, it all stems from the economy. For Marx, you can't just change society through new ideas or legal reforms. You have to fundamentally rip up and replace the economic base.
So how exactly did Marx think this massive change was going to go down? Well, he laid out a pretty specific process. First, capitalists extract surplus value, or profit, by paying workers less than the actual value their labor generates. Marx predicted that this inherent built-in drive for profit would cause capitalists to relentlessly exploit the working class, or the proletariat. Eventually, this deepening exploitation and completely irreconcilable class conflict would lead to massive economic crises, culminating in a spontaneous, self-guided social revolution by the workers themselves.
Now, right after that revolution, Marx knew the workers couldn't just magically snap their fingers and establish a perfect society overnight. A temporary, transitionary state would be required, which he famously called the dictatorship of the proletariat. The sole purpose of this temporary state was just to protect the revolution against any kind of bourgeois counter-revolution. Once the remnants of the old class system were totally gone, Marx believed this state would eventually just wither away entirely, leaving behind a stateless, classless communism.
But, history threw a huge curveball. When we look at Russia, V.I. Lenin just didn't buy that the working class was going to revolt spontaneously like Marx predicted. Lenin argued they would really only ever achieve a trade union consciousness, meaning they'd just ask for better wages and stop there. So he introduced Leninism, this concept of a dedicated vanguard party made up of professional, intellectually armed revolutionaries whose job was to actively guide the masses into revolution.
And then, of course, this model mutated even further under Joseph Stalin. What was supposed to be a temporary, transitionary state basically froze into a permanent totalitarian apparatus. Under Stalinism, the entire economy underwent complete state collectivization. The capitalist market was entirely eradicated, replaced by a rigid, centralized, top-down planning system run by incredibly powerful ministries in Moscow. So, common ownership basically just became state ownership.
And that brings us to the modern era. We want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. Industrial societies have completely transformed, right? The traditional manual working classes have shrunk due to deindustrialization, and modern capitalism has undeniably generated a lot of widespread affluence. So, socialists are forced to ask a really difficult question today. If the traditional working class revolution, or even the gradual democratic takeover has stalled out, must this ideology adapt once more to survive in our global service-based age? What exactly is the next road for socialism? Keep exploring, keep questioning, and thanks for watching.